The cruiser de Grasse had one of the most prolonged and varying design processes of any ship. It all started just after France had signed up to the Second London Naval Treaty, which among other things limited the displacement of light cruisers to 8,000 tons. Compared to the most recent French light cruiser design, the La Galissonière, this left only a margin for expansion of about 400 tons. There was a wish list of improvements based on experience with the previous cruisers, and some were simple: a bit more deck planking to improve grip and insulation, more ship's boats, and an extra aircraft catapult. But others were more complex. It was desired to upgrade the main guns to allow reloading at all angles, and there would need to be more powerful machinery to keep speed up given the increase in weight and dimensions. Although there was a careful balance to be met, as too much power and more than 2 screws would be needed, and that would take up more space and weight, which would need more machinery, and so on and so forth. All of these upgrades would leave only 120 tons to further enhance the ship, and from this 66 tons were set aside to increase the main battery elevation to 70 degrees, and the aircraft complement was dropped from 4 to 3 in exchange for switching the anti-aircraft battery from 4 twin 90mm mounts on the sides to a trio of fully enclosed 100mm mounts just forward of the aft main turret. Torpedo provision was increased from a pair of twin tubes to a pair of triples, and the funnels were trunked together into one, with the ship's dimensions also increasing fractionally. All in all, it wasn't a bad series of upgrades for a relatively small increase in overall displacement. 3 ships were ordered: de Grasse, Chateau Renaud, and Guichen, with the keel laid for de Grasse just 6 days before the outbreak of World War II in the Lorient shipyards. Work on the ship stopped, and then started, and then stopped, and then started again for the first few months of the war, and her sisters were cancelled outright. De Grasse was only about 1/4 done when work stopped for good, at least under French control. The machinery hadn't yet been installed, although it had arrived in the dockyard. The Germans then took over the port and ordered her finished to a point that she could be safely launched, as they wanted to use the slipway for other things. This work went slowly, and she was still on the stocks when in summer 1942 the Germans decided instead to convert her into a small independent-style carrier. Work on this went even more slowly, with the French workforce actually hiding much of the material that was sent to the ship in the ship's double bottom, which meant that between their go-slow efforts and a couple of stray Allied bombs, she was still incomplete when the war ended. Since no work had even reached main deck level, she was finished enough to get the hull off the slipway and launched in late 1946 while the new French government decided what they were going to do with her. At first, they thought about just completing her as she'd been designed, but soon it was decided that she needed more anti-aircraft guns. Better 100mm guns and more of them were specified, and the 37mm medium anti-aircraft guns were to be replaced with 40mm Bofors. French plans in the Marine Nationale at this point called for a fleet of 6 light cruisers and 6 anti-aircraft cruisers. Of that, they only actually had 3 light cruisers to hand at this point. But France was critically short of funds amidst all the post-war reconstruction, and so it was eventually decided to downsize the overall plans. The existing 3 light cruisers would be kept, but no new ones would be built, and instead, the anti-aircraft cover would be provided by 1 new ship, the Colbert, 2 ex-Italian Capitani Romani class cruisers converted to anti-aircraft ships, ancillary support from the T-47 type large destroyers, and finally the de Grasse, which would now be finished as an anti-aircraft cruiser. Since the ship had not been finished past the upper deck by this point, everything above that was of course a clean slate. And so a new type of superstructure was installed, along with a single mast, all of which supported a wide range of radar arrays. The main battery now became 16 127mm dual-purpose but primarily anti-aircraft guns in 8 twin turrets, 4 at each end, in a complex arrangement where one was superfiring above another and was in turn superfired by another pair of turrets which were mounted on the same level as each other, one on either side of the ship, the next deck level up. Additional anti-aircraft firepower came from 20 57mm guns, which were installed in 10 twin turrets, 4 on either side, and 1 at each end of the superstructure, superfiring over the pair of 127mm twin turrets, which were of course superfiring over another 127mm turret, which was superfiring over the furthest most turret. Got all that? Boilers generating 105,000 CV, or cheval vapeur, roughly equivalent to shaft horsepower, drove 2 screws for a top speed of about 33 knots, with a 100mm or 3.9-inch thick belt, a 1.5-inch thick deck, and an overall displacement now of just under 9,400 tons standard. Although aircraft and torpedoes had been eliminated to save some weight, that many more turrets meant a lot more magazines, a lot more hoists, and of course a lot more weight generally, which explained much of the increased displacement. The Grasse finally entered service in late 1956 and would serve in the anti-aircraft role for almost a decade. After that, in the mid-1960s, she was refitted with nuclear, biological and chemical protection, and all the 57mm guns were removed, along with the 2 aftmost 127mm turrets, and in their place a helipad and a massive lattice mast was installed, for she was now part of the French nuclear testing program, luckily in an observation role. Once that series of tests were concluded in 1972, she was brought back to France, decommissioned the following year, and then sold for scrap in 1974.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.